The xenobiology classroom on Galactic Academy Station Epsilon 7 filled with excited chatter as students from dozens of different worlds took their seats. The massive lecture hall was a marvel of engineering, designed to keep everyone comfortable despite their vastly different needs. Cool mist drifted through sections where the crystalline Velthari students sat, their transparent bodies glowing softly in the dim light they preferred. Nearby, the insectoid-mantoid students enjoyed higher humidity levels that made their chitinous shells shine with moisture. Professor Velterra floated gracefully at the front of the room, her ghostly ethereal form shimmering with barely contained excitement. She had been teaching xenobiology for over 30 years, studying the most dangerous creatures in known space. Today would be special. She was about to show her students something that few beings in the galaxy had ever seen up close and lived to describe. "Students," Professor Velterra announced, her voice carrying clearly through the advanced translation systems that made interspecies education possible. "Today you will witness true perfection in the art of predatory evolution. I am honored to present to you a living specimen from Soros Prime, one of the most feared death worlds in our galaxy." A murmur of nervous excitement rippled through the classroom. Soros Prime was legendary among spacefaring species, a world so dangerous that even military scouts rarely returned from its surface. The idea that something from that nightmare planet was here, in their classroom, made several students shift uncomfortably in their seats. The containment field in the center of the room flickered to life with a soft humming sound, and what appeared inside made half the class gasp in pure terror. Some of the smaller students actually pushed their chairs backward, instinctively trying to put more distance between themselves and the creature. Zarketh stood nearly 2 meters tall, and Professor Velterra had mentioned he was still just a juvenile. His body was covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light, giving him an almost shadow-like appearance. Powerful muscles rippled beneath his hide with each small movement, showing strength that could probably crush steel. Most terrifying of all were his 6 limbs, each ending in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through starship armor. The creature's yellow eyes swept the room constantly, tracking every movement with the calculating intelligence of a born killer. Even contained behind the energy field, his presence filled the classroom with a sense of primal danger that made every instinct scream warnings. This magnificent creature represents what we classify as a perfect apex predator, Professor Velterra continued, clearly delighted by her students' terrified reactions. Saurian hunters like Zarketh have ruled their homeworld for millions upon millions of years. They are faster than most spacecraft when they run at full speed. They are stronger than the industrial machines we use to build space stations. Most impressive of all, they possess intelligence that rivals many sapient species. Several students began taking frantic notes, though their hands shook as they wrote. This was exactly the kind of information that would appear on their final examinations, but it was hard to concentrate on academic details when faced with something that looked like it had stepped out of their worst nightmares. In the back row of the classroom, Dong-Ho Kim sat quietly watching both the creature and his classmates' reactions with calm interest. The human exchange student was the only member of his species in the advanced xenobiology program, having earned his place through exceptional academic performance and test scores that impressed even the most demanding professors. While his alien classmates whispered nervously to each other about the predator's obvious ability to kill them all, Dong-Ho simply observed with the same quiet attention he brought to every lecture. His dark eyes moved between Zarketh and the other students, noting details that seemed to escape everyone else. Crix, a competitive mantoid student who always tried to ask the most impressive questions, raised one of his 4 arms nervously. His mandibles clicked with anxiety as he spoke. "Professor Velterra, surely the safety protocols prevent this creature from actually harming any of us? The containment systems are completely reliable." "Of course they're reliable," Professor Velterra replied with the confidence of someone who had used such systems for decades. "The containment field is completely impenetrable using our current technology. Additionally, Zarketh has been carefully conditioned through months of training to view this classroom environment as neutral territory where hunted behavior is not appropriate." She paused for a moment, letting her students absorb this information before continuing with a more serious tone. "However, I want all of you to understand something very important. Outside this controlled environment, a creature like Zarketh could easily kill any sapient species currently sitting in this room. The speed, strength, and intelligence combination makes them nearly unstoppable predators when they decide to hunt. The classroom fell into uncomfortable silence as students contemplated this sobering reality. Many of them came from peaceful worlds where the most dangerous creatures were small animals that might bite or scratch. The idea of facing something like Zarketh in the wild was beyond their ability to imagine. The beauty of studying such specimens, Professor Velterra continued, is that we can observe millions of years of evolutionary perfection without any personal risk. Zarketh represents the ultimate endpoint of predator development. A creature so perfectly adapted to hunting and killing that a species has never faced any serious challenges to their dominance. As she spoke, Dong-Ho continued his quiet observations, making occasional notes on his datapad. Unlike his terrified classmates, he seemed more curious and frightened by the creature pacing behind the energy barrier. None of the other students noticed a thoughtful expression on the human's face, or the way he studied Zarketh's movements with the same analytical attention a mechanic might give to a particularly interesting engine. Professor Velterra activated a series of holographic displays that surrounded the containment field like floating windows into different worlds. Each display showed a different type of environment where a predator like Zarketh might hunt. Dense forests with towering trees, rocky mountain ranges, vast open plains, and crowded city streets all flickered to life around the classroom. "Now, class," Professor Velterra announced with enthusiasm, "I want you to analyze how Zarketh would hunt in these various environments. This exercise will help you understand how a perfect apex predator adapts its techniques to different situations. Let us begin with a forest environment on a low-gravity world." The holographic display showed a thick woodland with massive trees and heavy undergrowth. Several students leaned forward in their seats, eager to demonstrate their knowledge of predator behavior. Crix immediately raised his primary arm high in the air, his mandibles clicking with excitement at the chance to show off his academic preparation. "Professor, the predator would obviously use the trees for cover, stalking its prey from above. When ready to strike, it would drop down from the branches to maximize the impact of its superior mass and strength. The surprise attack from above would make escape nearly impossible." "Excellent analysis, Crix," Professor Velterra agreed with a pleased nod. "You clearly understand how physical advantages can be enhanced by proper positioning. Now, what about in an urban environment with tall buildings and narrow streets?" The holographic display shifted to show a maze-like city with towering structures and winding alleys between them. This time, Zeph raised her crystalline arm, her transparent form brightening with confidence as she prepared to answer. "The predator would use the maze-like structure of the buildings to its advantage," Zeph said in her musical voice. "It could funnel prey into dead ends where escape becomes impossible, then rely on its superior speed and overwhelming physical power to prevent any chance of getting away. The confined spaces would work in favor of the stronger creature." Another excellent observation, the professor praised. Anyone else want to contribute thoughts on different hunting scenarios? Several other students raised their hands, offering similar analyses that focus on how Zarketh's physical superiority would dominate in any possible hunting situation. They discussed desert environments where the creature's endurance would outlast any prey, underwater scenarios where its strength would overcome resistance, and ice worlds where its claws would provide perfect grip on slippery surfaces. Professor Velterra nodded approvingly after each response, clearly pleased with how well her students understood the basic principles of apex predator behavior. All of their answers followed the same logical pattern. Identify Zarketh's physical advantages, then explain how those advantages would guarantee hunting success. "Mr. Kim," Professor Velterra said, turning her attention to the quiet human sitting in the back row, "you have been very thoughtful during this discussion. What are your thoughts on Zarketh's hunting patterns and strategies?" Dong-Ho looked up from his notes, where he had been writing observations that seemed quite different from what his classmates were saying. He considered his words carefully before speaking, clearly not wanting to sound disrespectful to either professor or his fellow students. "With respect, Professor," Dong-Ho said politely, "I think the creature's hunting approach might have some significant limitations that could cause problems in certain situations." The classroom fell into complete silence. Every student turned to stare at the human, in amazement and disbelief. How could this small, soft-body being from what everyone knew was a moderate gravity world possibly critique a creature that represented millions of years of evolutionary perfection in the art of killing. Zeph's crystalline form flickered with confusion. But Dong-Ho, this is a perfect apex predator. How could there be limitations in something that evolution designed specifically for hunting? Please, go on with your analysis, Professor Valterra said, her tone remaining neutral but clearly curious about what the human student was thinking. Dong-Ho took a breath before explaining his observations. The predator seems to rely completely and entirely on overwhelming force for every hunting scenario. That strategy certainly works very well against prey that cannot adapt or learn from previous encounters, but it shows several inefficiencies that could become problematic. He gestured toward the holographic displays still surrounding them. The energy expenditure appears enormous for each hunt. The attack patterns seem quite predictable once you observe them for a while. Most concerning, there does not appear to be any backup strategy or alternative approach if the initial assault fails for any reason. Crix's mandibles clicked rapidly with skepticism and a touch of annoyance. But humans evolved on a relatively peaceful world with moderate gravity and comfortable temperatures. How could you possibly understand predator behavior better than a creature that was designed by millions of years of evolution specifically for killing other living beings? Dong-Ho smiled gently at his classmate, showing no offense at the challenging question. I appreciate your point, Crix, but Earth actually is not as peaceful as most galactic species assume it to be. Humans share our homeworld with creatures like lions, tigers, bears, wolves, crocodiles, sharks, and many other dangerous predators. Humans survived and eventually thrived not by being physically stronger than these predators, but by learning to be smarter than them. Theoretical knowledge gained from books and studies is certainly valuable. Professor Valterra interjected diplomatically, trying to balance respect for her human student with her expertise in the field. However, practical hunting instincts develop over millions of years of evolutionary pressure and natural selection. Zarketh possesses deeply ingrained instincts that simply cannot be taught or learned from academic study alone. I understand your point completely, Professor. Dong-Ho replied respectfully. I was simply noting that highly specialized predators sometimes develop what you might call blind spots. They become so perfectly adapted to dominating their specific environment that they can struggle when faced with prey that does not behave according to expected patterns. The alien students exchanged confused glances. The idea that this perfect killing machine could have any kind of weakness seemed impossible when faced with its obvious physical superiority and millions of years of evolutionary success. The next day, the xenobiology class gathered in the Academy's largest laboratory, a space so massive that small aircraft could have flown inside it comfortably. The cavernous room was specifically designed for practical demonstrations involving dangerous specimens that needed room to move and hunt naturally. Special reinforced walls could contain explosions, and the ceiling stretched so high that flying creatures could demonstrate their abilities without restriction. Professor Valterra had spent hours the previous evening arranging an elaborate hunting simulation that would showcase Zarketh's natural abilities. The laboratory floor now contained artificial rocks, synthetic vegetation, and carefully crafted hiding spots that mimic environments from dozens of different worlds. Everything was designed to create the perfect testing ground for apex predator behavior. Security Chief Thok stood at rigid attention near the observation deck. His 4 powerful Corvani arms crossed over his heavily armored chest. Even though the containment protocols were considered foolproof by Academy standards, he remained alert and ready to respond to any possible emergency. His years of experience had taught him that dangerous situations could develop faster than most people believed possible. Beside him, Dr. Zen worked quietly at a monitoring station filled with advanced sensors and medical equipment. The behavioral specialist kept careful watch on Zarketh's vital signs, heart rate, stress levels, and brain activity. Any change in the predator's condition would be detected immediately and reported to the security team. Students, Professor Valterra announced to the assembled class, her ethereal form glowing with excitement. Today you will witness natural predator behavior in its purest and most unfiltered form. Zarketh will hunt robotic prey that have been carefully designed to mimic real creatures from various worlds across the galaxy. Watch closely as millions of years of evolutionary development demonstrate why this species represents the perfect killing machine. The containment field that had confined Zarketh to a small area suddenly expanded with a soft humming sound, encompassing a large section of the laboratory and creating a hunting ground roughly the size of several football fields. The artificial environment was complete with hills, valleys, streams, and dense vegetation that provided realistic cover and challenges. Mechanical creatures representing different types of prey species were released into the environment through hidden doors in the walls. Some were built for speed, with long legs and streamlined bodies that could run faster than most organic animals. Others were designed for camouflage, their surfaces changing color to match their surroundings like advanced military stealth technology. A few were even programmed to fight back, with defensive mechanisms that could challenge a predator's attack strategies. Zarketh immediately sprang into action the moment his containment field expanded. His powerful legs, each as thick as a tree trunk, carried him across the varied terrain with speed that made the watching students gasp in amazement. The alien students watched in complete fascination as the predator's hunting instincts took over, transforming him from a caged specimen into a deadly force of nature. "Observe the perfect efficiency," Professor Velterra narrated as Zarketh spotted and immediately began pursuing a rabbit-like robot that was programmed to run in zigzag patterns. Notice the positioning, the overwhelming application of force, the complete absence of wasted motion or energy. The creature's razor-sharp claws tore through mechanical prey with frightening ease, sending bright sparks flying as circuits were severed and metal components scattered across the ground. Several students made sounds of appreciation at this impressive display of natural lethality and hunting prowess. "Magnificent," whispered Crix, his mandibles clicking with admiration. "Look how he calculated the exact angle of approach to intercept the prey's escape route." Zeph's crystalline form brightened with excitement as she watched the demonstration. "The power behind those claws is incredible. That robot was built with reinforced materials, and he tore through it like it was made of paper." But in the back row, Dong-Ho was taking very different notes from his classmates. While everyone else focused entirely on the Predator's obvious successes and impressive displays of physical power, he was quietly cataloging inefficiencies and unusual behaviors that the others seemed to completely miss. "Interesting," Dong-Ho murmured to himself, writing rapidly on his datapad as he observed details that escaped his fellow students. He had noticed how Zarketh approached the robot rabbit from downwind, following instinctive patterns for scent-based tracking despite the fact that the artificial prey had no sense of smell and could not be affected by wind direction. During the next hunt, Zarketh spent considerable time and energy pursuing a fast-moving mechanical bird through difficult terrain filled with obstacles and rough ground. The predator eventually succeeded in catching his target through sheer persistence and determination, but Dong-Ho noted that the approach required far more energy than seemed necessary for the result achieved. "He is following genetic programming, even when it does not match the situation," Dong-Ho wrote in his notes. "Instinctive behaviors that work perfectly against organic prey may not be optimal against mechanical targets with different capabilities." The alien students continued to cheer and express amazement at each successful hunt, but Dong-Ho observed that Zarketh was already showing signs of fatigue after only a few kills. The predator's movements remained powerful and deadly, but they were slightly slower than when the demonstration had begun. "Mr. Kim," Professor Velterra called out, having noticed his quiet observations while the other students celebrated each dramatic kill. "What do you think of Zarketh's hunting performance so far?" Dong-Ho looked up from his detailed notes, choosing his words carefully to avoid sounding disrespectful to either his professor or his fellow students. "The creature is certainly very powerful and extremely determined, Professor. However, I have been noticing that it uses essentially the same hunting patterns regardless of what type of prey it is pursuing." Dr. Zen's compound eyes focused on the human student with growing interest. "Could you elaborate on that observation, please?" "Well," Dong-Ho said thoughtfully, "a more adaptable predator might vary its approach based on specific behavior patterns of different prey types." The demonstration had been running smoothly for over an hour, with Zarketh successfully hunting one robotic prey after another while the students watched in fascination. Professor Velterra was explaining the finer points of predator psychology when suddenly the unthinkable happened. A power fluctuation rippled through the station's main electrical grid, causing systems throughout the academy to flicker and spark. The fluctuation created a cascade failure that spread from one system to another like a disease, and within seconds it reached the laboratory's containment controls. Warning alarms began screaming throughout the massive laboratory space, their piercing sound echoing off the walls and ceiling. Red emergency lights flashed in urgent patterns as the station's computer systems detected the critical failure and automatically began broadcasting danger warnings. Containment breach. Containment breach. The automated safety systems announced in dozens of languages simultaneously. All personnel evacuate immediately. Security Chief Thok's training kicked in instantly. The massive Corvani warrior immediately activated emergency protocols, his forearms moving across multiple control panels at once as he tried to minimize the danger to everyone in the laboratory. "All students to the emergency exits right now," he roared, his powerful voice cutting through the chaos and panic that was beginning to spread through the room. "Move quickly, but do not run. Stay calm and get out." But calm was the last thing anyone felt as chaos erupted throughout the laboratory. Alien students scattered in every direction, their different species reacting to fear in dramatically different ways that made the situation even more dangerous. The Veltheri students began flickering rapidly between transparent and solid states, their crystalline bodies losing cohesion as panic overwhelmed their normal control. Some became so transparent they were nearly invisible, making it almost impossible for others to avoid colliding with them in a rush toward exits. The Mantoid students' natural response to extreme stress was to produce high-pitched chittering sounds that reached volumes painful to most other species. Their forearms waved frantically as they tried to navigate through the crowd, accidentally striking other students in their blind panic. Several of the larger Corvani students began pushing toward the exits using their superior physical strength, but in their haste to escape, they accidentally knocked down smaller species who could not get out of their way fast enough. Bodies tumbled across the laboratory floor as the orderly classroom dissolved into chaos. Zarketh, who had been calmly hunting robotic prey just moments before, suddenly found himself free from the energy barriers that had confined him for months. The apex predator let out a deafening roar that shook the entire laboratory and made several students cry out in additional terror. The creature's yellow eyes swept across the room, taking in dozens of potential prey animals that had suddenly become available for hunting. His instincts, already activated and sharpened by the demonstration, shifted into complete overdrive as his brain processed the incredible opportunity before him. Professor Velterra's ethereal form blazed with panic as she desperately tried to re-establish the containment protocols using backup systems. Her ghostly hands moved frantically across holographic control panels, but the damaged systems were not responding to her commands. "Everyone please remain calm," she called out to her students, though her own voice clearly carried the fear she was trying to hide. "Security teams are responding to the emergency. Just get to the exits safely." But Zarketh was already moving with a terrifying speed that made his species the ultimate hunters of their homeworld. The predator charged directly toward a group of slower students who were struggling to reach the emergency exits through the panicked crowd. Zeph's crystalline form flickered wildly as she stumbled and fell, her panic affecting her species' natural ability to maintain physical cohesion. She became so transparent that other fleeing students could barely see her, creating an even more dangerous situation as they tried to avoid stepping on her. Security Chief Thok raised his plasma weapon and took aim at the charging predator, but then hesitated as he realized the terrible choice before him. Firing a high-powered weapon in a room packed with panicked students could easily cause more casualties than the predator itself. Dr. Zen was frantically working at his monitoring station, trying to activate emergency stun fields that could stop Zarketh without harming the students. But the electrical damage from the power fluctuation had affected these systems as well, and they were not responding quickly enough to prevent disaster. While everyone else either panicked or scrambled desperately for technological solutions to the crisis, Dongho remained completely calm. The human student sat quietly in his seat, watching Zarketh's movements with the same careful analytical attention he had shown throughout every class session. "Interesting," he murmured to himself, making mental notes about how the predator's behavior changed when presented with a target-rich environment. He is having trouble choosing between multiple prey options. This appears to be a classic overstimulation response. As Zarketh charged toward the group of struggling students, Dongho finally moved for the first time since the crisis had begun. But instead of running toward the emergency exits like every other person in the laboratory, he calmly walked in the opposite direction toward the laboratory's equipment storage area. Kim, Security Chief Fox shouted desperately when he saw the human, moving toward danger instead of away from it. Get to safety immediately. That is an order. Just one moment, please. Dong-Ho replied politely, as if they were still having a normal classroom discussion. He quickly grabbed a portable holographic projector and several pieces of standard laboratory equipment from the storage shelves. I believe I can help with this situation. Moving with swift but controlled efficiency, Dong-Ho activated the holographic projector and programmed it to create bright, rapidly moving light patterns that immediately caught Zarketh's attention. The predator's massive head snapped toward this new stimulus, his hunting focus shifting completely away from the fleeing students toward what his instincts identified as moving prey. The emergency response teams had worked for nearly 2 hours to repair the damaged containment systems and restore proper control over Zarketh. The massive predator now paced behind reinforced energy barriers that hummed with triple the normal power levels, while technicians ran final safety checks on every system in the laboratory. The alien students sat in complete silence, still processing what they had witnessed during the crisis. Many of them kept glancing between the contained predator and the quiet human student who had somehow managed to control a situation that had terrified everyone else in the room. Professor Velterra floated near her desk, her ethereal form flickering rapidly as she struggled to understand what had just happened. Her entire career had been built on studying apex predators, and her confidence in understanding predator hierarchy had been completely shaken in the span of just a few minutes. "Mr. Kim," she said slowly, her voice carrying confusion and amazement in equal measure, "I need to understand how you accomplished what we all just witnessed. You outmaneuvered a creature that represents millions of years of evolutionary perfection, using nothing more than basic laboratory equipment and quick thinking." Dong-Ho looked genuinely surprised by all the attention he was receiving from his professor and classmates. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly not accustomed to being the center of focus during class discussions. "Professor, I really did not outmaneuver anything special," he said modestly. "I simply recognized certain behavioral patterns that the creature was displaying and used appropriate responses based on what I observed. It is not really any different from the theoretical discussions we have been having in our regular class sessions." Crix leaned forward in his seat, his forearms gesturing with bewilderment as he tried to understand what had happened. But theoretical knowledge from books and practical application in dangerous situations are completely different things. How could you possibly predict Zarketh's reactions so precisely when none of us could even think clearly during the crisis? Dong-Ho considered the question thoughtfully, taking time to organize his thoughts before responding. "Well, humans evolved alongside dozens of different predator species that use very similar hunting strategies to what we observe from Zarketh today. On Earth, we shared our world with creatures like lions, tigers, bears, wolves, crocodiles, sharks, and many others. All of these animals could easily kill individual humans through superior physical strength and speed. Zeph's crystalline form, which had remained dim with residual fear since the incident, flickered slightly brighter with curiosity. But, Dong-Ho, you told us before that Earth was a moderate world with comfortable conditions. How could such a peaceful planet produce so many dangerous predators? Earth is certainly moderate when compared to extreme death worlds like Soros Prime, Dong-Ho explained patiently. But it is still a world where survival required constant adaptation and learning. Humans did not survive by being physically stronger than the predators that hunted us. We survived by learning to be smarter than them. We had to learn to predict their behavior patterns, avoid their natural strengths, and find ways to exploit their weaknesses. Dr. Zen, who had been quietly monitoring the discussion while reviewing data from his sensors, leaned forward with obvious scientific curiosity. "Are you suggesting that humans develop specific counter-predator instincts as an evolutionary advantage for survival?" "Actually, it was more than just defensive instincts," Dong-Ho replied, warming to the topic as he saw genuine interest from his audience. "Humans became persistent hunters ourselves. We had to learn to think like predators because we were predators. We regularly hunted creatures that were larger, faster, and stronger than ourselves, but we succeeded by using intelligence, careful planning, and endurance rather than relying on raw physical power. Security Chief Thok, who had remained silent during most of the discussion, studied the human student with growing respect and understanding. The way you control that crisis situation, that was not just luck or book learning. That was genuine predator instinct in action. Dong-ho nodded slowly as he considered the security chief's observation. I suppose you're right about that. When I was watching Zarketh's hunting patterns during the demonstration earlier, I found myself unconsciously comparing his techniques to predators I know about from Earth's history. He hunts very much like what we would call a solitary ambush predator. He relies on powerful initial strikes to overwhelm his prey, but he shows limited adaptability if that first approach fails for any reason. Humans evolved specifically to counter exactly that type of hunting strategy. Professor Velterra's ethereal form began to brighten as understanding slowly dawned on her. Yesterday, when you were critiquing Zarketh's hunting techniques, you were not just making academic observations about his abilities. You were unconsciously analyzing him as potential competition. I think that is probably true, Dong-ho admitted with a slight smile. On Earth, a predator that always telegraphed its intentions and used completely predictable attack patterns would not survive very long. It would starve because prey animals learn and adapt quickly to avoid danger. Successful hunters have to be unpredictable in their approach, efficient with their energy, and able to change tactics rapidly when their initial plan does not work. The alien students began exchanging meaningful glances as they finally started to understand why their human classmate had seemed so remarkably unimpressed by what they considered to be the perfect predator. To all of them, Zarketh represented the ultimate achievement in evolutionary hunting success. But to Dong-ho, the creature was simply another large carnivore with obvious behavioral patterns that could be predicted and managed. This explains so much about human behavior in general. Dr. Zen observed thoughtfully, your species' reputation throughout the galaxy for adaptability, tactical thinking, and what other species sometimes call psychological warfare. These are all characteristics that would be essential for successful predators. Crix's mandibles clicked as he processed this new information. But humans are also widely known for cooperation, altruism, and protecting weaker species. How do these traits fit with being predators? Pack hunting behavior, Dong-ho said simply, humans learn to work together in coordinated groups to bring down prey that no individual could handle alone. Cooperation and teamwork are not separate from our predator nature. They are essential parts of it.